Any questions? Awful quiet audience. Yes.
Even when the recipe book says, you know, quart jars or whatever it is, pints, are there ways to find out different times for different size jars? For instance, I use a 3-cup jar on many things because it fits what my, you know, I
probably put out by ball, and it's a refrigerator can jar, straight size.
Yes.
Yeah. And yeah, you're going to go by the quart size when you do that. So unless it's pints, strictly pint, then you would use, because it's a little bit bigger, you're going to use the quart time.
And the same thing with my 12-ounce ones.
Yeah,
Use the
with your, if you have
pint one.
yeah, if you're doing something that's smaller than a pint and it's a vegetable or anything like that, you're going to go by the pint deal. If it's fruit, you probably should too. Jams and jellies very seldom vary the time on them. They're generally 10 minutes or 5 minutes, whatever the packaging says. So, okay, anything else? Okay. Anyway, you've done that. We're getting ready. You want to let it set for 24 hours. And then you're going to go and tap the top. This is a different sound than this. So unless it comes down this way, then it is not sealed. Now at the end of 24 hours, if it hasn't sealed, and do not try to twist it so it'll seal, because you're probably going to break the sealing compound loose when you do that. So you want to just let it set for the 24 hours, and then at that time, take the rings off, wash them, and then put them away. And you probably should not, the recommendation now is to leave the lids off of the jars when you store them, because I had a bunch of kids who running around and grabbing stuff. I would leave the ring there and just set it like that, so that when they went out to get it, they would just set it down and twist it a couple times. And I was protecting the top of the jar, and I didn't want it to come unsealed. And that's fine, but I had enough rings to go with all my jars, so yes.
Excuse me for digressing back.
No, that's fine.
You said I did my first canning last fall, and I've forgotten whether it's the depression when it's sealed or it's not. So it's when it's depressed.
If you remember that you're wanting the air out, so it will pull the lid down into that vacant space.
Yeah, I remember hearing a pop.
Yes, and it will.
So,
it will.
Yeah.
But after 24 hours, if it wasn't a good seal, that pop might come loose. So you always want to check. And then if it has come loose, then you can do 3 things. One of 3 things. You can eat it up, you can put it in the refrigerator for a while, or you can freeze it, or actually 4 things, you can redo it. If you redo it, new lid, and that, and then the time has to be all over again the same. Yeah. So, anything else?
So I was confused about the bands, what you're saying, you store it without the band?
That's the way you're supposed to. And most, if you enter things in the fair, I noticed the Grange says they can come to the judge with the lid on, but then it has to be taken off for judging. Because when we judge, we're going to go and check the headspace and that's in there. My jars aren't perfect, so, but this one is a ½ inch right on. So that's what it, and if that ring was on there, I wouldn't be able to tell that.
And what's a good way to measure? Just to have a ruler around?
Yeah, you can have a ruler, or I'll show you what I use to judge with. All you women don't know what this is. Should him measure. So I set this at ½ inch or 1/4 of an inch or whatever, and I raise this up and I go this way to see what.
But isn't the ring the ½ inch? Isn't the glass ring the ½ inch?
No, not exactly. It's just a tiny bit above that.
Oh.
And then an inch is down about here. So, you know, it's so. talk a little bit about some of these other things here. I do a lot of dill pickles. My family loves them. And a few years ago, when my son was young, one of my sons kept missing dill pickles. Nobody knew anything about it, but a few years before my husband passed away, he was out in the woods and says, we ought to fill that big hole that Steve dug for a fort. He had dug it out at about an 8 by 10 hole in the ground and had covered it with some poles and covered that with some brush and then put a tin roof over it, some tin roofing, and put dirt over that. So you didn't know it was there after a year or so. And it had just a little hole to go down in. So my husband went down in there and found about 3 dozen quart jars in there. So they were disappointed for him. But anyway, I do pickles different ways. I do whole ones. I do slicers. I thought, well, there's slicers in the stores. Why can't I do slicers at home? And they work really well. Use same recipe. These are low sodium sweet dills. And then I'd put it in the jar and can it. But you have to heat it up and everything too. So this way I just put it into the canner and can it. But one thing that I learned, if you're doing it in a crock, you used to use a plate with a rock or a quart jar of water or something on it. And then you'd have to go every day just about and lift the scum and stuff off that was there, and your sauerkraut would turn dark, sometimes down an inch or two, and then you'd have to dispose of that and get rid of it. But if you would take some 1 gallon or 2 gallon Ziploc bags, and I'm hoping the instructions are in there. When I gave them to him, I don't know if they were there or not, but it's easy to remember what I'm telling you. Take 2 or 3 Ziploc bags and put a brine in them, the same brine that you would use when you're doing this. And don't fill them full, leave them so they're real floppy. And then in the big crock that I had, it took 3 of those bags to put in the top and mold them in there so that they will go clear up to the edge of the crock. And then you'll never have a bunch of scum on there. If some of them happen to get just a tiny bit on the edge of the plastic bag, just take a wet, damp paper towel and scoop it around. And you won't ever need to disturb what's underneath. But in the jar like this, that's a little bit harder to do. And we have put little baggies in there full of brine to hold it down. But someone told me one time about a different way to hold it down below the juice. And so I use craft sticks or popsicle sticks. And I measure them so that they're the same width as what the jar is wide. You always got to clip a little bit off the end. And then I put one end down under the shoulder, and then I kind of pull it up and bend it a little bit until the other end will go down under the opposite shoulder. And then I take the second one and make an X. And that will hold the sauerkraut down below the brine that forms in here. And then you can just put a towel or something over the top and it'll work for me, yes.
What's the reason behind filling the baggies with brine instead of water?
It's to keep it works the same way as what the old plate did. You want to keep the sauerkraut below the level of the
No,
brine.
I realize that, but
Mhm.
why not water?
Well, water, if the bag should break, you're going to dilute the brine
Okay,
between them.
okay.
Yeah, good question, by the way. Thank you.